trailer for this episode, you know that our next guest is not just well-informed. He has an intimate connection with the pulse of our country. He wrote a brilliant book that fits perfectly into our pursuits about how and why civilizations fail. And in order to keep up with this guy, I did a little more research than usual. In fact, so much so that in weeks to come, I hope I can announce how his book has added another branch in my career path. But for now, I'll leave you with that tease, and without further ado. All right, Byron, tell me your name, who you are, and what you do.
I'm Byron Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer, I'm a political columnist, and I host an NPR radio show called The Public Morality.
I just came across that the other day, just researching and fooling around. What's that radio show about? Plug it.
Well, the show, it's I think it fills a gap in our public discourse in that I'm not interested in telling you if an issue is right or wrong. I'm interested in having great guests and leaving open for you the listener, to determine how you feel about it. Because often the show is based on a word that we don't like to use anymore called nuance. That these issues are complex, and it's not black and white, good or evil, right or wrong. They're nuanced and they're complex. And so we try to have people on that can get into that nuance, not necessarily get down in the weeds and confuse people, but get into the nuance so then people can leave the show and come to their own conclusion. As I like to say, we raise more questions than we provide answers.
And your radio show gets somewhere between uncertain and certain, in the middle of the nuance.
Yeah, it gets in the nuance, if you look at some of the guests that we've had on the show, I think it speaks to it. We just had a couple of weeks ago, we had Lawrence Tribe, who was a constitutional law professor for one president, Barack Obama, one senator, Ted Cruz, and two people currently on the Supreme Court. That's the level of guests that we get on the show. Mm-hmm. And it's just a discourse. The show really is no different than what you and I are doing. Mm-hmm. I like to say it's just a couple people sitting around having drinks. Only difference is I have a microphone and recording it.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's get down to your book.
Okay.
Just for the audience's sake, one of our top shows was an interview with a doctor of political science speaking of the fall of empires, and it was entitled The Banality of Evil. And it was so well received that I was trying to do a follow-up episode when I came across your book, Solitaire, The Banality of Evil, and
Magda Goebbels and the Banality of Ambition and Evil.
But Solitaire.
Yes.
But you mentioned Magda Goebbels. Who was her? She was back in World War II and pre-World War II, married.
Her claim to fame was that she was titled the unofficial First Lady of the Third Reich. Mm-hmm. Hitler never married, and his long-term relationship with Eva Braun was largely kept a secret. Mm-hmm. So Magda Goebbels was the female face of the Third Reich that people saw. They saw her at events, sometimes even with Hitler. She was married to Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda. So he did a lot to put her out for the German people to see. So, which includes putting her in film shorts. So before you saw a movie, mm-hmm. if you were not German, before you saw a movie, you saw a clip, oftentimes with Magda and the children. She had a weekly radio show mm-hmm. where she talked to women on how to dress, what the German women mm-hmm. should wear. All those kind of things. So she was this face of Nazi Germany for women. And she had the physical looks. She was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, so she just fit the bill.
She had the Aryan race look about her.
Yes.
Now, did she was she born into politics and all that? Was she part of the aristocracy?
No, not at all. In fact, Magda Goebbels, I mean, her upbringing, this sort of really gets into the book. Now, her upbringing was one of, shall we say, curious circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
She was born, it looks like, and I want to emphasize it, it appears, no one can say for certain, that her mother had an affair, and her mother was a house worker. She had an affair with someone who was part of the aristocracy family. They never married. Magda got pregnant. So when Magda was born,
Magda's mother.
When Magda was born, the name of her father was left blank on the birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Magda Ritchell, as in the presumed father, Oscar Ritchell.
Mm-hmm.
So they married about a year after Magda was born. That marriage was short-lived, and then Magda's mother, Auguste, married a Jewish man by the name of Richard Friedlander.
Okay.
Friedlander then moved the family to Brussels. And
Mm-hmm.
he was a middle-class businessman. And I stress that because class during this time is really, really important. So he's a middle-class businessman, moves the family to Brussels.
Okay.
And so this time period, Magda's born in 1901. So we're talking about a time period up till about 1910, 1912, somewhere around there. But no, maybe a little longer, 1914.
All right. So the bottom line, she grew up. Her mother was a housemaid, likely illegitimate.
Yeah.
And, but moved up the ladder, so to speak, by her mother's marriage to a middle class guy.
Middle class Jewish guy, and it's very important to note that he was Jewish. That's important.
Well, everyone was cool with the Jews back then, right?
Right, but
I'm kidding. I'm so kidding.
Right. I'm about to say, but here's what happens. I know you're kidding. Here's what happens. Magda was very close to her stepfather, extremely close.
Mm-hmm.
She took on his last name. He was not a practicing Jew per se, but
Mm-hmm.
he did acknowledge certain holidays, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah. So she grew up in a Jewish culture.
Is that how she met her first lover?
Well, it is in fact how she met her first lover, because when World War I broke out in Brussels, where Magda was staying, anyone who was not Belgium was forced out.
Okay.
So they had to return to Germany. And so Magda meets a young lady by the name of Lisa Rosoloff back in Germany. Now, Lisa was from the Ukraine. And so Russian Jews were also forced out of Russia, the same way. So she meets Lisa, and her and Lisa immediately become friends. And so the Rosoloffs and the Friedlanders became like this big family. And then so they just sort of, Lisa was either at Magda's house, Magda was either at Lisa's house, and Lisa's had a brother named Chaim Rosoloff. And Magda met Chaim through Lisa.
Okay.
And then that was her first lover. One of the things about Magda, she was really attracted to Chaim because he was a leader in the Zionist movement,
Mm-hmm.
even as a teenager. And he was really believed in the values of Zionism. And she was attracted by when he gave a speech, how charismatic he was,
Mm-hmm.
and his hand gestures and his ability to move the crowd. Does that sound remotely familiar at all?
Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds a little lot like Adolf Hitler. So
Sure.
So she's attracted to him. At the same time, though, Germany is changing.
What year are we talking about?
So now we're in the midst. We're toward the end of World War I. So we're like 16, 17, 18.
Okay.
The war concludes.
Mm-hmm.
Treaty of Versailles signed. Is very punitive on Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So Germany's in an economic upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Treaty of Versailles, I just said, is very pernicious on the German economy. And what that does is that rises a lot of groups, right-wing, left-wing groups,
Mm-hmm.
who are certain they have the answer.
I like how you tied that in there.
They're certain they have the answer to Germany's problems. And so what Magda hears on the periphery, she's very indoctrinated in Jewish culture. By this time, Haim had given her a Star of David that she wore religiously.
Mm-hmm.
But on the outside, Magda hears how the Jews are Germany's problem. That even though
Mm-hmm.
given the Jewish population, the percentage of Jews that fought for Germany in World War I was greater percentage than their population.
More per capita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're scapegoated. And she hears this. And I don't know quite where Magda acquired it, but she had this indefinable need for more.
Mm-hmm.
So she was poor. Her mother marries a middle-class businessman.
Mm-hmm.
Now Magda wants to be part of the aristocracy. And she doesn't see a relationship with Haim Rosaloff getting her there. I mean, this guy's talking about moving to Palestine, living in a kibbutz.
Mm-hmm.
And she never actually tells him no, but she never tells him yes either. The other attribute that Magda had,
Mm-hmm.
that from my research, what she had the ability to allow you to see whatever you wanted to see. So if you and Magda had a relationship, she would allow you to see whatever it was you thought you saw that made you like her.
All right. And she would project that image of her, the personality, what have you.
Right.
And then one day she's on a train and her life changes.
Right. And let's just back up. She's on a train to charm school or finishing school, whatever it's called.
Uh-huh.
So because she had got accepted to charm school. This is her way to get into the aristocracy.
Oh, hell yeah.
She meets a man on the train. His name is Gunter Kwan. He is actually one of the founders of BMW. And that family still controls BMW, has a controlling interest in BMW to this day.
Now, let's make sure the audience realizes, I suppose most of all of them are familiar with the car, but post-World War I, what was BMW doing?
Pre-World War I. Post-World War I, actually pre-World War, World War I going forward, they were making jets, fighter jets. In fact, the symbol, that BMW symbol, is a propeller.
Mm-hmm.
The BMW symbol, that's a propeller.
Okay.
That's always been their symbol. And they didn't get into cars really until after World War I, because the Treaty of Versailles really curtailed what Germany could do militarily.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of pushed BMW into making cars.
And motorcycles, I guess, too.
And motorcycles, yeah. Exactly.
I read your book more recently than you have. So.
Absolutely. Once you prompt me, it comes right back.
And I got it so the audience knows, Solitaire really inspired me. And I forgot to mention this in the intro, that we have never, ever interviewed an author about a work of fiction. Now, granted, your novel is 95% nonfiction, 95% fact and extremely well researched, which is why I probably fell in love with it. And in a warped kind of way, fell in love with your Magda. So
I know that makes sense. You know, I did an interview a couple months ago, and what I said to people was I understood her less after doing the research, after writing the book, than I did before I started.
How so? Why?
Because there's a level of ambition, that desire for more.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't gotten into it. We can talk about it later, but I'll just cut to the chase. Her ambition ultimately led to her killing 6 of her 7 children.
Oh, don't bury the lead, Byron.
What I'm saying. And her father, she lets her stepbrother die in a concentration camp. We'll come back to it and explain why. But I'm saying I don't understand that.
You know, you buried the lead, Byron. You writer, you. All right. So she meets this quant guy, that one of the founders of BMW, richer than shit, but also tie into the war machine.
Right.
World War I, and in the lead up to World War II, and in the midst of World War II. So he's pulling in the bucks. But they have a kid, but that marriage doesn't work out.
And I think the real pivotal point here is that she never loved Quant, but he was part of the aristocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he asked her to marry him,
mm-hmm.
he put down what I define as a Faustian bargain. He said to her, one, if we get married, not only can your father, your Jewish father, not walk you down the aisle,
mm-hmm.
he cannot come to the wedding, and you must change your name from Freelander back to Richel.
Okay.
And she does all 3. And so going back to when I said I understood her less after I finished, I mean, he gives her 3 options that either one of those is a deal breaker.
Yeah.
For most people. She takes all 3, yes. And I think therein lies the shift in what she becomes going forward. That accepting that deal. Because as you said, they have a child. Matt, and he already had 2 stepsons. He was a widower, had 2 stepsons.
Mm-hmm.
His oldest son was only 6 years younger than Magda when they got married. She ends up having an affair with him,
mm-hmm.
with her oldest stepson. She got to a point where she was openly having affairs. Quant finds out, and back in Germany at that time, if a woman was found to have an adulterous affair, she gets no alimony and loses the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Magda is really in jeopardy of going back to this proletariat state that she despises. Mm-hmm. But she remembered in their summer home, she saw these letters that Quant had paid off mistresses of a lower class.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but class was everything in Germany. And for it to be publicly known that Quant was cavorting with women of a lower class, in this case, 2 classes, below the bourgeoisie, down to the proletariat, it could have really affected his business interests.
Mm-hmm.
So Quant acquiesced, gives her a really nice settlement. Magda is rich, but she's also incredibly bored.
Now, wait a second. Did Quant have a Michael Cohen paying off the lower class mistresses like Stormy Daniels?
He was just doing it himself.
Oh.
Yeah, he didn't have a Michael
DIY?
Yeah, he just doing it himself. But there was always these letters in exchange, and he had the letters, and Magda found them.
Okay.
And so she used the letters to blackmail him.
All right. So she gets to get a divorce, and she gets the money.
Right.
And it's a good chunk of money.
It's a real good chunk of money.
Okay.
So she never has to work again.
Now, she doesn't have to work again, but she's not in with the in crowd.
No, because the aristocracy, you know,
Mhm.
like it's almost like what we call them here in America. Oh, they're old money. They're new. Oh, they're new money. You know,
Yeah.
that nouveau riche. So it's that they just see her as a young woman who took advantage of a lonely widower. So
Okay.
she is not accepted in the aristocracy at all.
All right. How does she remedy that?
Well, the way she remedies it is she gets invited to go to a club called the Nordic Club.
Mm-hmm.
The Nordic Club,
What year is this?
what year? This
Yeah.
is like 28,
Okay.
like 27, 28.
So the Nazi Party isn't revved up yet.
They're not completely revved up.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Uh-huh.
the when she goes to the Nordic Club, and the Nordic Club subscribes, it's a lot of the aristocracy,
Okay.
but it subscribes to the superiority of the Aryan race.
Uh-huh.
And she notices that they have sort of this respect and reverence for this group of Nazis that attend the Nordic Club.
Mm-hmm.
And she, at some point, she sees the Nazis as being beyond aristocracy. I mean, the guys she met at the Nordic Club that were Nazis, if she had met them at a bar or a restaurant, she wouldn't have given them a time of day.
Okay.
But because she saw how the aristocracy reacted to them, she
Mm-hmm.
sort of went, This leads Magda.
Now, wait, Byron. Why do you suppose, and maybe you know this already, but if you don't, just give me an educated guess, why the aristocracy felt comfortable letting the Nazis in their court?
This is part what I know and part educated guess. So it's a little of both. Because the biggest mistake that Germany made is that they ultimately saw Hitler as controllable.
Okay.
They thought
Hindenburg?
Yes. And so they thought, so the aristocracy, there's a group politically that shares their thinking, the superiority of the Aryan race, who is slowly, around this time, though, the Nazis are only 4%. I mean, the Nazis were nothing until the beer hall raids in 1922. And when Hitler gets arrested and he gets 5 years, he only spends 5 months, but he makes a name for himself. The Nazis were nothing. So by the time Magda meets them, they're at 5% in the elections. That may not seem like much, but remember, during the German parliament then, there were over 30 political parties.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were over 30 political parties at the time. So the Nazis are growing, and the aristocracy sees them as a tool
Mm-hmm.
to perhaps do their bidding.
And that multi-party system is prevalent in many European countries right now, and the Nazi or ultra-right socialist fascist parties are gaining in percentages.
Yes.
Not wild swings of the needle, but there's a gradual erosion.
Oh, absolutely. And since you read Solitaire, since I have, when the Nazis took control, I believe it was 36%. Is that right?
37.
37%. They only had 37%. I mean, that was the largest. Mm-hmm. While they had elections, 37% was the largest percentage they ever received.
I remember that number specifically and distinctly, and with abject fear, because that number resounds in the United States right now. Just saying.
Yeah, no, that 37. There's some, just with like Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, a couple others, Janis Joplin, how these young stars die at 27.
Uh-huh.
There's something about that 37% and despots that we want to keep our eye on. So
Physicists, I hear, unless they come up with something good by 26 to 32, they're pretty much toast too.
yeah.
There's that I guess that sweet zone when you're in your 20s.
Sweet spot. Yeah. So
I don't remember that sweet spot, but
nor I. So there we have it. So then this prompts so Magda's introduction to the Nazis and the Nordic Club prompts her to go to a Nazi rally.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is very interesting because as you sort of asked earlier, Magda growing up, even though she went to a lot of Zionist meetings with Haim Rosalaw, she was really never political.
Uh-huh.
She was going because Haim was the featured speaker. She was never really political.
Right.
So she goes to this Nazi rally, and Goebbels speaks, and she loves his speech.
Now, she had met him at the Nordic Club, though, right? They bumped in a stairwell?
She had not met Goebbels. The stairwell comes later.
Ah, okay.
So Goebbels speaks, and then Hitler speaks. And then when Hitler speaks, it puts her in this rhapsodic state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's up when everybody else is up. She's like Sieg Heiling when everyone else is Sieg Heiling. She has her arm raised. I mean, it's almost like an out-of-body experience for her. Magda, the next day, she joins the Nazi Party. And when she goes to the Nazi Party in her area, they see her because they see her as part of the aristocracy, even though the aristocracy doesn't see her that way. They see her as part of the aristocracy, and it's proved that their message is gaining a foothold. So she's in charge of recruiting aristocratic women to the Nazi Party. But the aristocratic women still see her as the young woman who took advantage of a lonely widower. So she quits that job. She's also motivated that she wants to meet Goebbels. The reason she wants to meet Goebbels, she's figured out that no one has ever seen Hitler publicly that wasn't tied to an event.
Okay.
Goebbels was all over Berlin promoting himself. And so she goes to the headquarters in Berlin.
What year are we talking about?
Now we're like 29, 30.
Okay.
Like 29. So she goes to Nazi headquarters. She gets a job. She bumps into Goebbels in the stairwell, and she's wise enough to know, have gotten a lot of attention from men by his reaction that he's interested, though he doesn't say anything. Goebbels finds out who is she, what she does, what she's doing at the Nazi headquarters. They tell her because Magda spoke, I believe, four languages. So she was translating all of these languages for Nazi Germany and other publications. So Goebbels the next day summons her, and gives her a new job to really keep tabs on everything that is spoken by every leader in the Nazi cause, including Hitler. Which, for Magda, she has a twofold reaction. One, this guy is really out there. Like, he's keeping tabs on Hitler.
Yeah.
And the other side is, wow, this guy's really out there. He's even keeping tabs on Hitler.
Yeah, but he wasn't Hitler yet. He wasn't the Hitler we see in the newsreels yet. He was one of the leaders of the Nazi Party. And
he has bought in. He's right. He's not Hitler yet. He's not the newsreel guy yet. But Magda, for some reason, unbeknownst to me and most people, have you ever heard how some people can look at, say, a line of cocaine and they just get hooked immediately? it was almost like that scenario for one Nazi rally, and she was hooked. She read the book. She got indoctrinated. She bought in. I would say by the end, she had bought into the playbook in a way that not even Hitler or Goebbels had bought into the playbook.
I read that in your book, how her mother and other people that, post World War II were saying how there wouldn't be a single conversation. You could be talking about the price of rice in China, and she would then turn it back to
the Nazis and Hitler. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this, but all of her children, but her and Goebbels had, their names began with H as a tribute to Hitler.
Oh wow! All right.
That's yeah. See, what do you don't know what to do with that? I don't know what to do with that. I mean, yeah.
All right, but that says so much and leaves so much unsaid.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So
not see why I say I understood her less when I finished the book. That yeah.
Oh, I can, we've had a lot of conversations about this, and yeah, I'm seeing it now for sure. All right. So to make a long story short, she marries Goebbels. All right. Hitler is rising in power. Mm-hmm. When did the war machine start to crank up? Was it before Hitler or was it after Hitler? Hitler becomes chancellor, and
yeah. I think the war machine begins to crank up on January 30th, 1933, because that was the day Hitler became chancellor of Germany.
Give us the circumstances.
Because now Hitler's made chancellor because you talked about the parliamentary process in Germany. You have to build coalitions with other parties.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazis had received 33% in that 37% in that last election.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be dealt with. We make Hitler chancellor. We can use him as our tool. That will appease his followers, and we can do business as usual. That was the thinking.
What Theresa May was unable to do in England this last week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what looks like Benjamin Netanyahu is unable to do this week.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and the guy, that's Hindenburg, is the Kaiser?
Hindenburg dies.
Uh-huh.
Hindenburg dies. Hitler becomes chancellor. And then the Nazis use criminal tactics. The Reichstag building, which is the German parliament, mysteriously goes up in flames.
Mm-hmm. Did they get help from the Russians?
Well, they said it was a communist, but most likely the Nazis did it themselves.
It was a bad joke.
Yeah.
I was thinking about current times.
Okay, the Nazis did it themselves.
Right.
They immediately found a socialist to blame it on.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler then, almost through force, was granted dictatorial powers, temporarily suspended elections. So by March 1st of 1933, remember I said January 30th. So by March 30th, 1933, Hitler had dictatorial powers, suspended elections, and Dachau concentration camp became operational.
When was the night of
the Long Knives?
Not the Long Knives. The
Broken Glass?
Broken Glass, Crystal, whatever. What was that? When was that?
Kristallnacht was 37.
Okay, so a few years beyond.
Yeah.
What am I talking about, Byron?
Well, Kristallnacht was. You know what? Let's look that up, because I transpose Kristallnacht and Night of the Long Knives. But Kristallnacht was, I think as I go back now, it may be earlier, but Kristallnacht was this not purging, but just destruction of Jewish businesses, Jews being arrested, the Nazis were holding up signs. This is a Jewish business. You don't want to patronize this. So it was an all-out attempt. Everything that Hitler talked about in his book, Mein Kampf, that Rudolf Hess wrote in 24, 25, he's bringing to fruition. Crystal Knock was 38. I had it right.
38.
Crystal Knock was 38.
Okay.
So Crystal Knock was 38.
But to put that in a paragraph, a lot is going on that should shock the sensibilities of most people. They're tearing down or vandalizing Jewish businesses, death camps being built, erected. They're burning down the parliament. What they do to the socialists that they said did it, I'm sure he didn't last long.
No, he didn't last long.
Yeah.
But here is the thing I would say, not to disagree with you, but to add to counter that.
Mm-hmm.
Germany immediately after post-World War I, Germany had been reduced to this primordial state, fear.
Starvation.
Inflation, wheelbarrows of money that was worthless by the time you got it to the store. You couldn't buy bread. And so people in that state, critical thinking is a luxury.
Okay.
No, when it gets down to, that primordial state of fear, I mean, now you are reduced to Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal. They had fear. You have to go a couple rungs up the intellectual ladder to get to, we talked earlier about nuance and certainty. So to have that kind of ration, you got to go a couple rungs up the ladder. But I mean, you don't have to go very far to have fear. And Germans were in a reactionary state, and all of a sudden, factories are going up, more people are working. The aristocracy falls in line. So
in preparation for this interview, I found a newsreel which showed just how thriving Berlin was in the 30s. And arts, outdoor parks and recreation, food, nightlife, everything. It was happening on all different levels, from family to
And there were Nazi signs everywhere as a subliminal message for the good times that you are experiencing. Here are the reasons.
Talk about another Faustian deal, but
yeah.
Are we excusing those people of that time?
No, I'm not excusing them. I'm just simply saying that when any group of people are placed in a primordial state of fear, that the social justice, our concern for our brother or our sister becomes a secondary consideration.
Fight or flight kicks in, and
I mean,
safe harbor is the best of all.
An example that I often use is if we had a candidate in 1932 running in America in the height of the Depression, and that candidate said, I can get America back to working, I can get factories going.
I can make America great again?
Yeah.
Or Germany great again?
But I can make America great again. But and all of a sudden it starts to happen. But you just have Black people missing. Would anyone really rage a protest?
Yeah, my Black producer is in here right now. She's missing. I'm protesting. Where the hell is she?
Right. You know what's gonna happen. So
I'm kidding. I'm making light of a very serious point.
I know, but my point is, I'm not excusing German people, but I do understand what happens when one, like, for example, you and I had an interview on Wednesday, and we planned to have an interview today. But if I was in a state of fear and I wasn't sure about what's going to happen to me that evening, making an interview with you today, 48 hours later, is just beyond my comprehension. That's all. That's the point I'm trying to make.
No, and that's a great way to illustrate it. So the people are in this, I don't know, I don't want to say miasma, but they're in a euphoria.
That may be somewhere, but it didn't take long to figure out that it was going to be the Nazis' way. Now, you could feign that with euphoria, but it didn't take long that you didn't question. You know how in a lot of the movies of the golden era in the 40s and classic Hollywood, they do Nazi movies and everyone does the Heil Hitler.
Yeah,
that was a law. If you didn't do that, you could be arrested.
I've seen that one picture, Byron. Have you seen that one picture of along the street side? All the people are doing the Heil, and there's one guy doing this. Have you seen that?
I have seen that. Yeah.
That is
the fight at the highest order. But it was against the law. But to not do that was against the law.
Now, one of the things I really liked about your book is, obviously, I'm into the state of mind of the people of that time. And I thought, not that she's an analogy or a metaphor or anything like that, but Magda is, I don't know what the literary term is, but she's a nice vehicle. She's a good vehicle to get into the head of what the population's about. And she was just, I think, more successful than the average Joe. Everyone, yes, is succeeding. No one's worrying about the meal and all that. They're happy. They went from flight or fear or flight or whatever, fight or flight, and starvation and primordial man to now they've got a job in a factory. Now they're going outside to movie theaters and things are going good. But there's some people, ambitious people like Magda, that have carried that wave a little further.
This is how I see it. You can track the rise and fall of Nazi Germany, the life of Magda Goebbels.
The perfect vehicle.
Right. The rise of Nazi Germany, she marries, the number two, arguably the number two man in Nazi Germany. They're doing the propaganda films. By the time the Olympics hit, you have this real apex, and people. I
forgot about that.
I mean, the 1936 Olympics, people think that the Nazis got it going on. Lest we forget that Adolf Hitler was Time Magazine's Man of the Year.
No way.
Yeah, in 1936. Now, but Man of the Year doesn't necessarily mean you're a great guy. It just means that,
I think Osama bin Laden was.
You were the newsworthy guy. So the 36 Olympics might be the Nazi apex. And so then you have the Goebbels family, the children, Goebbels, the beautiful wife. I mean, that's the apex.
The idyllic imagery. Yeah. Because he was in charge of propaganda, was he not?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So all the short films with the children in them, her radio show, he did all that.
The adoring parent.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things about the Goebbels is really interesting. They were, as parents, it seemed like they were actually ahead of their time as parents. They did not believe in spanking their children. I mean, they were, so in some ways as parents, they were ahead of their times. But as the Nazi regime declines, the Goebbels marriage gets frayed. Both are conducting extramarital affairs, And so by the end, where Germany is crumbling, you have Magda Goebbels confined to a bunker, waiting to kill herself. I mean, so her life from 1930, when she meets Goebbels, runs a parallel track with Nazi Germany.
You could almost say her life was a bell curve from when she was a child. Germany, everyone's starving it, just post World War I, it's terrible, peaks and then declines. But she's on the right-hand side of Hitler in the bunker. The Russians are coming in. The Russians are tasked with taking Berlin. They're bombing the piss out of Berlin. They're reducing it to a gravel pit. So they're in this bunker. Hitler's there. Goebbels is there. And the name of your book is Solitaire. And we're going to get there. Don't bury this lead, young man.
All right.
So
got it, JD. I said, got it, JD.
All right. So it's over. It's over. There's no writing on the wall or anything. There's just probably, the bunker's falling apart from above. Hitler kills himself. Before he dies, he gives a pin to Magda, the lead in your book.
Mm-hmm.
She wears it with pride. Then what does she do?
And then she, Hitler kills himself.
Mm-hmm.
She writes a letter to her son Harold, explaining that her, Goebbels, and the children are going to die in the bunker.
Mm-hmm.
She then
Harold's the original son with Quant.
The original son was gone. Harold Quant, who eventually took over BMW, died in a plane crash in 1967.
Mm-hmm. All right.
She then, as the ritual, she puts the children to bed. They sing the song for a tribute to Adolf Hitler, and then she gives them this potion that puts them to sleep, along with this doctor, and then she administers cyanide to all 6 children. They die, and then she walks into the other room and sits down and plays solitaire, waiting for her husband, Joseph, to come so they could go upstairs to the Reich Chancellery Garden and kill themselves.
Outside?
Yeah, outside.
Huh. I figured they would have done it in the bunker so they wouldn't be interrupted.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess they went outside because what they did was exactly what Hitler did. Hitler killed himself in the bunker, but he went upstairs. They had his body taken upstairs and burned. So, and I guess they went outside and did it because, as Bob Dylan said, when you got nothing to lose. So maybe, so maybe that's why they did it. Yeah.
All right. So that I guess we kind of brushed over the point, and I let me just repeat it for emphasis. She administered poison to her 6 children.
That is correct.
All right, and there was a dentist present that had access to the poison or some shit like that.
Who assisted her only because your choice is help me kill my children or you die.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so let's just go back if we could. When we talked about how she embraced the Nazi playbook,
mm-hmm.
John, help me kill my children or I'm going to kill you. Those are your choices. I mean,
how do you want to do it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're dealing with.
Have you met my kids?
No.
Well, if you had, you'd be like,
they'd be like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a deal. Okay.
No problem. I'm kidding, kids. Only one of them watches my show. The other one, I will kill him. Now, anyways.
No.
All right. So she kills the kids. Does anybody, the dentist doctor survives the bunker? If the Russians take Berlin, how do you know she played solitaire?
The way we know she played solitaire is because Hitler's secretary Heido Jung. I can't remember if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Heido Jung. Tells the story. I mean, she lived till like 2002, and the movie Downfall was based on her being in the bunker. I mean,
really?
She was about 20 at the time.
Uh-huh.
But Heido Jung is the one who tells the story. So that's how we know she played solitaire.
So,
and then there was
she was in. I'm guessing now she was an East German, under the control of the Russians. So it took until after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 for the rest of the world to get the story.
Yeah. Okay. And she had been arrested. I think it was the Russians who arrested her and
had to be, yeah,
and debriefed her. And so she sort of lived largely after that in obscurity till toward the last third of her life. She started to grant interviews and she told the story. And the movie Downfall is based on. And there was another gentleman whose name escapes me who also lived to about 90. He was also in the bunker, and he also confirmed that Magda played solitaire.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
So the title of your book is The Banality of Ambition, or Solitaire, The Banality of Ambition and Evil. Now, let's get into the weeds. That was a great rendition of the story. And so far, we've been talking about nonfiction. So far, we've been talking about what's been documented, what we've been able to see in newsreels and what multiple historians have confirmed. This is Magda's life. Interviews with her mother.
Right.
So it's a well-known journey through life, tragic journey or justified, I don't know. Anyways, banality. What does that mean to you in the light of Magda and her life? The banality.
I think the best way to say it is not what does it mean to me in terms of Magda, but what does it mean to me in terms of the Nazi regime?
Okay.
Because, it's hard to imagine the way this is how I describe the Nazis. Imagine if Lucky Luciano had a country.
Okay.
The mafia. Imagine the mafia had a country.
I know his son.
Lucky Luciano's son?
Oh, no. His Murderers Row compatriot. I know his son. Anyways.
And so imagine if like I say, if Lucky Luciano, the mafia had a country.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Nazis. I mean, they were a criminal enterprise. Mm-hmm. They weren't statesmen. They weren't diplomats. They were criminals. They were thugs. I mean, if you met with Hitler and you said, Hitler, you're wrong and disagreed, someone's coming to your house to kill you that night. I mean, they were just thugs. And so they had this banal drive for power.
Just this blasé kind of, this is how we do it.
Right. I mean, and nothing typifies that to me better than within 60 days after Hitler becomes chancellor, he has dictatorial powers, and the first concentration camp for homosexuals and gypsies is up and running.
Why did he pick on the homosexuals and gypsies first?
Maybe they were the low-hanging fruit. The pink triangle, that the gay symbol, the pink triangle. You ever seen that? Gays, a lot of gays use the pink triangle as a symbol, right? Well, that pink triangle comes from Nazi Germany because that's how they labeled homosexuals in the concentration camps.
Really?
With a pink triangle.
Yeah, and they labeled the Jews how?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how they labeled them. Besides the tattoo, I'm not sure how.
I thought it was the Star of David, something similar to the Star of David. But anyways, all right. So it was just the way it is. That the guy took power, and
Well, John, let me just jump in real quick. I want to because you asked the question, I want to tie it all together.
All right.
The reason I answered the way I did about Magda and the Nazis is because Magda so embraced the Nazi playbook that there was no air between the two types of thinking. Okay. So that's why I said earlier, her life runs this, and you said even better, her life is a bell curve, for the Nazis. That's an excellent way to put it. But there's no daylight between
every now and then.
Yeah, but there's no daylight between Magda Goebbels' thoughts and ambition and the Nazis' thoughts and ambition.
And you, in your book, and I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but you intuitively, or as part of your research, there was a daylight with Goebbels and fascism.
Yes.
He was just a pragmatic guy riding the train.
Yeah, I mean, he had his own ambitions. Let's not. We don't want to give him a pass.
Oh God, no.
No. But I mean, Goebbels. We have on record, Goebbels knew Hitler's plan was not going to work years before it came to fruition. He just said, "I've gone too far. I'm not going to get a pass." The Allied forces, led by the Soviet Union, United States, and Great Britain, aren't going to give me a pass. But he knew it was flawed. He knew it was flawed. I mean, Magda. Let's go back to the Harold Quant letter. I mean, to her son Harold. And I'm paraphrasing it, but she basically says she doesn't want to live in a world that doesn't include Adolf Hitler.
Nor did she want her children.
Right. They're too good for that type of world. It does. I mean.
Plus the downside.
Right. But the thing is, what's fascinating me about it, what would have befell her husband, because he would have been executed in Nuremberg. There's no question about that. That would not have happened to her. That would not have happened to her children.
Keep in mind, the Russians probably would. Well, he could have been caught escaping,
right,
or in Argentina or something like that.
Right.
There was nothing good on his horizon.
No, she could have got out.
All right. Now let's suppose she gets caught, and they put her on trial. Okay, a prosecutor wants to make an example of her, and so he thinks he has probable cause, and he puts her on trial. What's the outcome?
She gets off.
Yeah.
Because she was nothing. She was in the films, but it wasn't. She wasn't in the meetings that orchestrated the final solution. She wasn't in the meetings that invaded Stalingrad. She wasn't, I mean, she wasn't in the meetings that oversaw Buchenwald, or she was. I mean, Magda Goebbels, when you peel it away, was nothing. Yes, she was the unofficial first lady of the Third Reich, but really, what she was the only female face in a male-dominated criminal enterprise. And she had no. I mean, look at the other. Not a single spouse of the Nazi leadership went to jail. Following. So I think nothing would have happened to her. That's it.
All right. Now the unofficial face spouse. What'd you say?
Unofficial first lady.
Unofficial first lady. Who would you compare to in the United States? What first lady?
Well,
Eleanor Roosevelt, Michelle Obama.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Give me again.
All of them, but I came up with three.
Okay.
Eleanor Roosevelt, Michelle Obama, because of her attractiveness. Eleanor Roosevelt, just because of her savvy, and Jackie Onassis, because she was put out there as the beauty of Camelot.
Okay. Eleanor
you
Roosevelt.
could go off the list.
Eleanor Roosevelt was far smarter and far more influential
Okay.
than Magda Goebbels. So we're going to throw her out. Second one was Michelle Obama.
Mm-hmm. Again, more influential.
Michelle Obama had that type of influence in that we're looking at different mediums now, but not quite as influential as Magda was with the German women. But she was influential with women, but Magda was more so because the radio and movies was it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have many more ways we get our information.
Oh shit! We got to get back to that. Put a pin in that. Plus, Michelle Obama shied away from the spotlight. Magda embraced it.
Right.
So, now, all right.
Jackson.
So, Jackie Onassis.
Okay, there is a comparison with style.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we can agree that Jackie had style, and Magda had style. I will give it that, but Jackie didn't embrace. Camelot became a myth that Jackie created after JFK's assassination.
Uh-huh.
But Jackie wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid on the New Frontier.
Fair enough.
You know, if I had to pick someone,
mm-hmm.
and no one, and one of the great things about it for us, for our history, we really have no one that we can compare it to. But if I had to pick one person
mm-hmm.
right now,
Melania?
No, I would say Ivanka, the daughter.
The daughter. Okay.
Or
interesting.
Or you ready?
Yeah.
Or because the reason I don't pick Melania, because Melania tries to stay out of the camp.
Yeah.
The other person would be Mary Todd Lincoln.
Oh, but she was nuts. I don't think Magda was nuts.
Well, she was. I don't think she was certifiably nuts.
Well,
she had
back then they didn't certify, manic depressive and, sociopathic.
John, I'm not certifiably nuts, but I am crazy. So.
Well, you'd have to be, because, and here's a shout out, a plug for your book. You don't just recite the history; you researched it well. But there is a fiction aspect to your story, and that is getting into the head of Magda, which makes her so relatable as we immerse ourselves in the miasma that is banality. Whoa! Did I just say that?
You did. In writing this book, I did not want to write an homage to Magda Goebbels. I didn't want to do that. And in the first couple chapters, I was worried about that but we're dealing with a little girl. And all of us are born innocent. And there was a moment, there was a couple lines that I wrote where it hit me that I think I'm in her head now.
Okay.
One of them was, and this is late in the book. She's talking. We won't give anything away, but she's talking to one of the playing cards.
Uh-huh.
She's talking about her relationship with her stepfather and with Jaime Rosolov. And to justify what she did, she said, "The Jews are Germany's misfortune. It was their misfortune to love me." That was not a direct quote from Magda Goebbels. That was my creative license.
All right.
But I felt that was in line with how she thought.
All right.
I really felt that was in line. And I got to tell you, that kind of scared me. Because I'm like, whoa, am I buying into this stuff? Wait, whoa. It kind of scared me. But I didn't want to write the book Magda Goebbels was misunderstood. I didn't want to write that book.
Never comes off that way. All right. Let's tie a knot in this.
All right.
Denouement, you writer, you. We've touched on so many examples of what was going on in the 30s in Berlin, Germany. And you talked about the radio starting up, becoming prevalent.
Right.
And accessible to everybody.
Right.
And we talked about that pesky 37%. All right. And you just mentioned, and why I thought of this question or this follow-up, you just said the fear that you had when considering Magda and getting into her head, the fear you felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you when I heard that 37%, the fear I had. I know you've written an article, don't compare leaders to Hitler. And I'm not. This question is not comparing. Let me finish, Byron.
No, I'm just saying yeah.
All right. What I fear is the prevalence of social media, not the radio, but social media. It's a new medium, and someone who gets his hands on it that can adapt to it I might be afraid of. I might be afraid of that pesky 37% that might get more pesky and start burning down Parliament. Someone who captivates large crowds. I'm fearful of the crowds. Byron, don't jump down my throat.
I'm not.
I'm fearful of the crowds. All right.
Just for the record, I'm with you with everything you said so far. I'm with you with everything you said.
All right. I could go on. The list goes on. Captivating crowds. Devoted followers. Again, the followers. I fear the followers. I fear those crowds. I fear the other end of the social media receiving the message of that medium. Are there any lessons we can learn?
Yes. All right.
Tell me I can sleep easy at night.
Well, I'm not going to tell you that. No, I think your fears are well-founded. The reason I don't like the comparison, that doesn't mean, when I say I don't like the comparison, what I reject to, like this century,
mm-hmm.
during Iraq, there was a group of people that compared George Bush to Hitler during Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Then Barack Obama passed the Affordable Care Act. There were a group of people that compared Barack Obama to Hitler because of the Affordable Care Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we come up and we've done the same. So every president this century has been compared to Hitler. And
he set the bar.
But what I'm saying is, when we do it, we risk watering down the banality of that evil. And I don't want that to ever go away, the banality of that evil. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't events that warrants one to be concerned and warrants one, to like, wait a minute, whoa, what's going on here? And you mentioned the 37%. One of the things to recognize historically, 60 days with Hitler in office, he effectively took away the fundamental premise of the American experiment, which was dissent.
Mm-hmm.
The Declaration of Independence was a document based on dissent. Dissent is at the root of our progress.
Mm-hmm.
It was Susan B. Anthony, and Angelina Grimke saying, you know what, women ought to have the same rights. Dissent. It was Martin Luther King. It was Rosa Parks. Dissent. It was Harvey Milk. And gay rights. Dissent. So dissent is part of the American narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler took that away from Germany in 60 days. And Germany was not a country rooted in dissent.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a country rooted in uniformity and being told And that's not part of our DNA.
Mhm.
Now, what I would say, and this down, so you can sleep well knowing that dissent is part of our DNA, that 55% already say they will not vote for this president under any circumstances.
Mhm.
So on that part, you can sleep well. However, there's
Mhm.
another. The other side, as you've heard me say this before, is the apathetic party.
Yeah.
The apathetic party is the largest growing political party in America.
Mhm.
And if you are apathetic, if you don't think it'll change, if you don't think, making a change, you stay at home and you think there's not a dime's worth of difference between whatever two candidates they are, then we fall into the warning of George Bernard Shaw, who says democracy is the vice and ensures the people are governed no better than they deserve. And so there, my friend, I think every single one of your fears is well-founded, because we risk falling into that. Because I'll just be frank, if we are now saying that the new norm for the executive branch is to arbitrarily decide what investigations on him are legitimate and which ones he can just ignore, if we're now saying the executive branch is no longer a co-equal branch of government, but superior to the other branches, and he can ignore congressional subpoenas without paying a price, if we're saying that, then we're gonna get, then your worst fears are going to be realized. Because the problem is the actions of this president is not this president in a vacuum. It sets a precedent for every president going forward. Right.
Generations.
Right.
All right. On that note, it's a good time to end it, brother. Well said.